Everybody, this is On coming to you with this month's video. And this month, what I want to talk about is how to be caring without being a doormat, and not be a doormat. I mean, we so many times we get lost in this aspect of caring, and we think that we have to just give in and give in and give in. And we don't really have to do that. So it's going to be kind of exciting to delve into this today. For those that aren't too familiar with me, I am the author of this book, The Code Journey. And yes, I'm still holding up 2024, but 2025 is out. And you can check that out on my website, compassioncodes.com. Um, Go there, go to the goods tab, select the code journey, and you'll see the links directly into the books. So excited about that. And if you haven't picked up your copy, definitely do that. That being said, I want to get on to this topic today because in January, the codes that we have coming up are really connected to a lot of responsibility. They're connected to our commitments, our obligations, things like that. And when we consider that, and that being a big part of the monthly influences for January 2025, what I see happen a lot of times with people is those people who have a big heart, they care. Those are the people that other people tend to dump their work on, right? Those are the people that they hold this image that, well, okay, we'll just dump it on that person because they'll do it if we don't do it. And they feel bad about leaving work undone and not picking up the slack if somebody doesn't, if somebody calls off and they can't do something, they just feel like they have to pick up everybody's work. But when we do that, we're not necessarily coming from the heart. We think we are, we feel that we are, but we're not necessarily coming from the heart because we end up enabling all kinds of unfavorable patterns instead of just coming down a little bit and saying, no, this is what's acceptable, this isn't acceptable type of thing. So I have kind of 8 parts here, or 8 key points that can help us to stop being a doormat. And, I have been there enough times in my life. Jessie was there all the time. Probably. She was always that one that showed up when nobody else was. She always had that bleeding heart that, it's like, oh, I feel so bad for the manager, or I feel so bad for this person or that person. So I'll go in and do it, even though nobody else is. And, um, and she was, just like that. So when we start to get into this, the first point out of this, or the first tip that I have in here, is to stop letting people dump their work on you. I know it's hard to say no. I know it's hard to, even if you can do it, that doesn't mean you should do it. And that's a hard thing to learn sometimes because what happens is people then develop this habit. Now, there are always exceptions, right? I mean, there's rare exceptions. Somebody's mom, dad, child, whatever, goes into the hospital unexpectedly, God forbid, we don't want that to happen, but something dramatic like that, and they've never asked you before, well, that's one thing. If you pick up the work under an extreme circumstance like that, that's fine. But when people have a habit of not doing their work, when they have a habit of just saying, hey, will you pick this up for me? Hey, I got to take off at 3 o'clock today. Will you take care of everything? And that's happening like every single week or a couple of times a week, then, you're no longer just doing somebody a favor. You're no longer just picking up the slack. You have become the person who will do twice the work for half the pay while they're doing basically no work and getting full pay. And then some, in those benefits. So we have to stop letting people, we have to say, you know what? I'd love to help you out, but I can't. Or, and of course, we want to be honest about it. Like, you know what? No, I'm going to be taking off of work at this time today. I've got to, leave right after work today, or I've got to do this other thing. And, I won't be able to do that for you. Um, and sometimes you just have to let people fall a little bit. It's like a kid. If they never fall down and scrape their knees or, you know, try certain things, they're not going to learn. And so sometimes you have to just say, nope, I can't do it. Sorry. And this is part of making them accountable for their work, and accountable for what's their responsibilities. And when people just let them get away with this, then those people keep getting dumped on and dumped on and dumped on. So you have to be willing to say no. Like I said, it's one thing when it's a one-off situation, it's an emergency or an extreme type situation, and they're not asking you for something very often. But when it's a pattern, what we do then is every time we say yes to that, we're enabling them in a pattern. And that's a pattern that is abusive. We don't always classify it as abuse, but it is abusive. And it does, wear over time. And we might deal with things well and we might handle things well, but that doesn't mean that we're not being impacted by it. And I'm sorry, I've got a little bit of an itchy nose going there. The second thing is we want to look at the pressure of there being too much to do. And this is another thing, when we allow everybody to dump their work on us, there is added pressure that's put on us. So it's like, oh man, now I've got to do this extra work. And that means, I'm under all of this pressure because I've got to do mine and I've got to do theirs and I've got to do this. And we have to really look at that factor in there, because that's almost like a self-abuse pattern when we do that. That we take on that added pressure. And if we get to a point where we're trying to take on too much and we're doing that all the time, again, if it's a one-time thing for somebody, that's different. But when we add that pressure to ourselves, we're now putting ourselves in a burnout. We're now putting ourselves into a space that is going to wear us down. We're now putting ourselves in a space of maybe getting sick or, all kinds of things, hitting those burnout phases and just not even being able to keep up with our own work, let alone what we're taking on for somebody else. And when we don't take that pressure off by saying no, then we end up not enjoying our vacations because we end up being sick instead, or we end up working 60 hours a week and then we never have any fun. We never have any balance in our life. And that's not going to be a healthy thing either, because when we don't have that to offset all of the work that we're doing, we actually work at a component that is not as strong. We're not giving our best because it's like we're just trying to survive things at that point instead of actually putting ourselves into them. So we no longer can really care about what we're doing when that happens. Now, the third thing we want to do is to look at removing our resistance to work. So when we look at this component, this isn't so much connected to taking on other people's stuff, but looking at what are we resisting? What are we procrastinating? If you're the one that is putting your work off onto the other people, then you want to look at why are you resisting your work and remove that resistance. A lot of times there's a variety of things. We've built it up maybe to be bigger or harder or worse than it is. And if we just get into it, then, we will be fine and it will flow and it will go and it will work out. On the other hand, another component to this is a lot of times we just see it as work. We just see it as a boring, tedious job that we have to get through. Like doing house chores or something like that. What we want to do is to find the value in what we're doing. So if I just look at something like, oh my God, I got to clean the house, I've got to do this, I've got these chores, I've got those errands. And if I only look at it from that perspective, it's going to be self-defeating in a way. It's going to be built up to be so much that I'm going to have resistance to it because it doesn't sound like fun, right? Especially on my day off. But when I turn it around and I say, wow, I love having a clean house. Wow, this is going to be so beneficial to me because, I'm going to be able to function better during my week because everything's straightened up. It's clean, it's neat. I'm not getting distracted by what isn't done. And, I love that feeling when everything is clean. And I know every time I clean something, it's like putting a blessing in my space. So by removing that resistance to work, I'm not going to push stuff off to somebody else to do. And I'm going to actually find joy in the work I do. So that's another thing. And if you're the person getting jumped on, you may want to bring that up to the person who's dumping on you. Why do you resist this so much? Why is this something that you can't get to? And approach it from that angle, because they may not even be totally aware that they're resisting things. And then we want to be very careful because, as I mentioned at the start, the fourth tip is that we cannot enable laziness. If you truly care about something, if you truly care about the work you're doing, what's going on in that work environment, if you truly care about the people around you, you will not enable the laziness. You will not enable the manipulation that they're doing. Because if you love somebody, you're not going to enable that. You don't you don't become that doormat for them. You don't let them fall into those habits. If you truly care about somebody, that's what we do when we don't care about somebody, is we let them fall into those bad habits. And then we enter down that sort of abusive relationship path, which is not going to favor us and it's not going to favor them. So if we don't enable the laziness, then we're not going to be taking on their work all the time. And that's such an important piece in this, I think. And it's a piece that we overlook, because what we think we're doing, we're trying to be the martyr, we're trying to be whatever, the good guy, whatever, the nice person that helps out, whatever it is. And so we're thinking of things from that perspective. Well, I'm just being nice. I'm just helping this person out. No, you may actually be enabling these things that are detrimental for them and detrimental to you. And that needs to stop in there. So when you look at that, you've got to find that strength to start saying no. You've got to find that, you can be reasonable about things. But again, if you're doing half of somebody else's work or all of their work, and they're still getting paid and you're only getting paid, for your work alone, that's not okay. That's not helping anybody. You feel devalued in that situation. They feel like they can get away with everything. The company feels like, hey, the work's done, we don't care. And, it just spirals us down some bad paths when we do that. Now, the fifth point is that it traps us into patterns that we can't get out of a lot of times. So, if you've been going along for 5 or 6 years and you're just like, okay, I'll pick it up. Okay, I got it. Okay, I'll take care of it. Now you've set a pattern out of that's very hard to get out of. Again, because people look at it and say, hey, I don't have to do this work because that person over there will cover it. They'll take care of it for me. And they've already set that pattern. So I know if I just walk away and go home at the end of the day, they'll pick up whatever I don't do. And so we're setting these unhealthy patterns. I mean, that's kind of like, again, that's kind of like telling somebody, hey, it's okay to abuse me. Hey, it's okay to take advantage of me, but it's not okay when we get down to doing that. So we create our own traps. And I encourage you that even if you have fallen into this trap where you've set up this pattern that you can't get out of things, I'll tell you, Jessie was one of those overachievers, and she would always do all of this work and the different jobs that she would get out of. And people fell into the trap, and they still were not very nice to her, even when she did all of that work, even when she did all the extra stuff and took care of all of these things. And it took her going on vacation. It took her stepping away for a couple of weeks at a time, to get people to realize how much she was doing and to get any kind of appreciation. But when she came back, she didn't always set those boundaries to say, hey, I'm not doing all of this. And the patterns continued in there. So when you get down to looking at this, you can get trapped in these patterns. So you've got to practice saying no. You've got to practice saying no to these people and say, nope, sorry, I'm leaving right at, 5 o'clock today or whatever the schedule is or the time. Nope, sorry. You're gonna have to figure it out. And this is a huge thing, again, because we want people to be able to figure things out for themselves. They need to come in and step in and do the work that they have to do. Again, because when they get used to getting out of everything, then that just it creates negative energy for them. It leads them down really unfavorable paths. So again, if you are caring about somebody, you don't want them to go down those unfavorable paths. But when they get out of doing everything, they are going down those unfavorable paths and they're creating a lot of issues for themselves, even if they don't show up right then and there. Now, on the sixth point that we have here, we want to keep things simple and release heavy schedules and restrictions. So again, when we look at this aspect, a lot of what happens is when we take on other people's stuff, it actually makes things more complicated. Sometimes on a business side, it's complicated because of paperwork, but it also gets, again, the waters get muddy when we do this. And so when we start taking it on, it's like, oh yeah, no, so and so's not doing that, but so and so is taking that on now. And then it shifts and it changes around, and pretty soon nobody knows who's doing what or who's done what or any of this. So when we say no to people, when we stop letting them push their work onto us and stop moving things onto us, we can actually keep things simpler. Oh, so and so handles this, so and so handles that, instead of so and so handles this, but today so and so's handling that. And, again, that all just starts to get very confusing. And when we have these commitments, we really need to know what is our commitment versus what is somebody else's commitment to take care of? What is their responsibility to take care of? And identifying that. And again, once in a while, if you choose to help somebody out, that's fine. But to be bailing them out all the time, they need to work it out. I mean, it's like going into, a restaurant and they don't know how to manage things and they don't know how to pace their customers out. And so, they have all kinds of long wait times and they don't know how to plan their food orders or things like that. And then they don't have the food that they need to serve the customers with, and if somebody's not wanting to do something, they push it on to somebody else. And then pretty soon it's like, well, who put the food order? And it just it gets crazy. It gets crazy. And what happens is in this process, it creates heavy schedules, right? If you're taking on other people's work, if you're doing their stuff for them, it makes your schedules heavier and heavier. And what we want to consider to do is how can we lighten up our schedule? Because again, this is kind of that aspect, like if you have some freedom in your schedule, if you're, don't have all kinds of restrictions in what you're doing, then you have more freedom to handle things as they need to be handled. And you also have this aspect of you can always take on more if you feel like it, but it's very hard to get rid of what you've already taken on. So, if you've taken on more than you can handle, that is this burden, where you've taken on an extra 20 hours a week, it's very hard to get rid of that when people are used to you doing that. But if you pare down and say, well, I'm going to work 30 hours a week, and then if I want to, and I have a good week and I'm feeling well and some rare situation comes up, well, yeah, okay, then I'll pick up the extra hours. So you can always add to things. I tell people this too when like they're volunteering with things, as people get older, they get into their senior years and they want to do volunteer work and they tend to get overcommitted into organizations. I mean, our organizations do need good, committed people, don't get me wrong, but they tend to overcommit and then they all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm burned out, I'm tired, I'm working harder than when I worked and these sorts of things. So then you come back and it's like, okay, let's ease some of this stuff up. What is really necessary? What is the real core? Let's just stick with that for a while and see what that feels like. Because when you do this heavy work, when you are taking on these things, you lose your balance. And when you lose your balance, everything starts to feel very heavy. Everything starts to feel more overwhelming. And then it gets harder and harder and harder to do things. Now, number 7, the more that we can have our commitments be more humanitarian based. So we really want to take that look, what is the type of work I'm doing? Where am I putting my time? And is there any actual benefit to humanity, to animals, to the planet? And I'm not asking you to go out and be some activist or heavy environmentalist or anything like that, but looking at where are you committed? And a lot of us, we take something to earn money, and I get it. I understand it. Um, because obviously we have bills to pay and things that we have to take care of. But you also want to look at, is there a humanitarian component? This is really important in January to take a look at that. Or am I doing something just to participate in something, just to keep my time busy? And it's not really, doing any real benefit. But the more our commitments, our responsibilities, our obligations align with things that benefit people, animals, the planet, things like that, then actually we don't feel the heaviness of the work. We don't tend to resist it so much. It doesn't seem to be so hard to get in there and to do the things that we need to do when it has this positive focus on it. So looking at, am I investing my time and my energy into positive things, or am I investing it in things that I don't really agree with? And if we don't agree with things, it's going to be very hard to get our motivation up or our energy up to go in and do those things. And then number 8, we need to care about what we're doing. And this is so important. Again, we need to actually care about whatever it is we're doing, even if it's something mundane. I know of friends that, or connections that, they make a whole big thing out of opening the curtains in the morning or lifting the blinds up in the morning, and they greet the day, and they get in and they actually care. I mean, they care about the meals that they make. They care about, how they're connecting with things that they're doing. And I think this is a big thing, because when you actually care about what you're doing, you will do a better job at things. You will produce greater quality. You'll uphold integrity with things that you're doing. And so care about what you're doing, but don't enable other people who don't care about what they're doing. Okay, because that's where you get dumped on in there. So we can care, and caring is very, very important, but caring has a lot of forms. And it's not just about doing whatever, whenever, and basically being people's slaves, and they're being at their beck and call for every little thing because they don't feel like doing it. Again, if we care, sometimes we have to put our foot down. If we care, we don't let people go down these paths of being lazy and complacent and taking advantage of other people. And that is so very, very important. So we can care, and we should care, but we should care about what we're doing. We should care about what kind of habits and patterns that we are supporting in ourselves and in others. And we should definitely care about what, put ourselves into the work. Care about people in general, care about, again, animals, planets. We should care, but that doesn't mean we have to be taken advantage of. That doesn't mean we have to let people mistreat us. And that doesn't mean that we have to let them dump their work on us and to take on more than is ours. Because again, I think what you'll find in the end, they're not going to necessarily like you any better because you do that. They may say that, but they don't usually. They just see you as somebody who will do their work for them. So I hope this has helped. Please get out there, care, but don't be a doormat to people. You can do it. Just have a little strength. Just put your foot down a little bit. Use that discernment. Is this a one-time thing or a pattern? And if it's a pattern, it's just like a bad habit you need to break. And you can do that. All you have to do is choose. You just got to start saying no, and you just got to start honoring what is best for you, and to realize that when you say no and you don't take it on, you're actually saying, I love you and I care about you, and I'm not going to let you get away with this. So take care, everybody, and I will see you in 2025.